Anybody else been having fun in the book of Revelation? Great stuff, crazy. Who would have ever thought that, right? But we're having a good time. The good time ends today, just so you know, by the way. I just was saying that because today it ends. Today it ends because today I have the joyful privilege of talking to you about what does it look like in the world when politics and religion mix. It's literally our passage today, Revelation 13, is what it will ultimately look like. You remember they say like at Thanksgiving or Christmas or whenever you're with family, don't talk politics, don't talk religion. Today, Revelation 13, let's go all in with all of it. It's just the all in, and it's good. And I think it's especially good. First of all, one, our focus is going to be on what does this look like in the last days. But we always like to try to do our best to say, okay, let's talk about, though, how does that express in our lives as Christians today? And of course, I've already said what a unique thing that it is that we're in an election year. It's an election year, and I want to get to talk about what does it look like in the scriptures? What does it look like in the Bible here? So the first thing that I want to say before we even get into the actual text itself is this. From the beginning of time, almost the beginning, but very early on in the beginning of time, all the way till today, those that go into politics and those that go into religion share a few things in common. And they're not good things, by the way. Those things are a hunger for power. Now, I'm not saying every politician, and I'm not saying every person who goes into religion. You're going to have to get used to nuance. It's not one or all. It's not all or none is what I mean. It's sometimes a little bit mixed. But so not everybody has a bad intention. Not everybody has a good intention. But historically, it's always been this way that if you are on the political side of things, you always attach a spiritual element to it to kind of get people on your side. Okay, and if you're on the spiritual side, if you want to bolster what you're doing, pick up a few political things. Grab onto a few political things. And of course, and it's terrible. I mean, had I known I'd be in Revelation 13 in 2024, yeah, I'd have rethought that bad boy. But here you are with it's always been this way. Whether you go back to World War II, you talk about, Hitler pulling in Lutheran theology to try to make a case for why he was the right person. It sounds insane today in 2024, but in 1932, 33, it didn't sound so crazy. But also, you had religious leaders, and you've had it throughout all of time. Whether a part of the Roman Catholic faith or even into the Protestant faith, you've had people who are like, I'm doing good, things are good, but if I did this, I could pull in a whole nother group. I could pull in even more power, and it has been going on forever and ever and ever. You think of even having lived in Eastern Europe so long, I'm always thinking of the communists. That ended the year that I moved to Russia. Things had changed. And even there, politics and religion mixed, right? Because their view was there's no God, right? There's no God. Now, then why did they spend so much energy crushing the church? If there's no God, why did you spend so much effort minimizing, diminishing, persecuting, and causing so many Christians to suffer and so many religious people? Why? Because it's always been this way that politics and religion will always get mixed up. The more you listen to political figures will attach themselves to biblical language, but you also see it the other way, where biblical linguists, Christian pastors, Catholic, whatever religion, will adopt political language. And partly it's done because, you see, on the political side, they know people speak that Bible language, so that will help. And on the religious side, they know people speak that political language, so that will help. And it ends up becoming a total mess. It's that famous quote by Lord Acton. He said, "Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." And this is the ultimate expression of that in Revelation chapter 13. Ultimate expression of that, okay? We're going to see two leaders. Not sure how far we'll get. We'll do our best. But we're going to see two leaders. One will be a political leader, and one will be a religious leader, okay? In the Bible, one is the political leader we call the Antichrist. The Bible calls him often the beast, okay? And then the religious leader, we'll see later in chapter 13, he's called the false prophet. He's some kind of a religious leader. I would recommend, and especially if you've if you're versed in these things and you're like, I already know who this is the Pope, and this is, so you got to put that stuff out of your mind, okay? Because people are already like, it's the Pope and it's Obama, or it's the Pope and it's, some guy that's probably been gone, Back in the 30s and 40s, it was the Pope and Hitler. Well, he gone, so now we're moving on. The only one consistent is the Pope, and it's only Protestants that say that, okay? So there's something going on there that we're missing a little bit here. So I want to, like I've said over and over, I want you to not try to identify like, oh, this is who that is. Many people have grown up Catholic. It's super offensive to say it's the Pope. We don't know that it's the Pope. It's just that Protestants are like, oh, we're not a part of that, so it must be that guy. That's the game of zero or all, and that's not the way it works. We just want to read it, absorb it, and say, okay, Lord, now we're trying to gain some understanding. But exactly who and what and even when, it's not really known. These things weren't written so that one day you and I could say, told you so. Do you understand that? The Bible, the end times were not written so that we could go to heaven and say, I was right, you were wrong. It's not going to work like that. And if we believe in the rapture, then who are you going to tell you were right to? You won't even have a chance. As you're on your way up, you're like, I was, and you're gone. So it's not going to happen. We have to get that thinking out of our head. The goal of end times teaching is not, hey, I told you so. But it's that we would gain understanding into even the world that we're in today. John didn't write this for a group of people. Think of how irrelevant this would be to a group of people 2,000 years ago. Hey guys, there's going to be a false prophet and an antichrist. But not in your lifetime. How irrelevant. But it bore great relevance because it was speaking to them about the systems of the world and the system of God. And we want to understand that. Babylon has always existed, and it will always exist until Jesus returns. And Babylon isn't the city or the geography. We talked about this on our Wednesday night, right? Babylon it's an evil system. It's a system set up by the world and empowered really by the devil, and it's changed over time. It was Rome in John's day. So it's always existing. So let's start. Verse 1, I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. It's describing the Antichrist. But if you notice, and I'm going to read it in just a second, it's a very similar description to the dragon in chapter 12, verse 3, who is the devil. So the Antichrist is not the devil, but he is and shares the qualities of the devil, shares characteristics, look at verse 3 of chapter 12. It'll be on the screen here. Another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his heads. So you could describe the Antichrist like the devil junior, but not the devil, okay? He is not the devil, but he is inspired and empowered by the devil. Now, the word Antichrist, that we use the word Antichrist far more than we use the word beast, though the Bible uses the word beast more. But Antichrist is mentioned 5 different times in the Bible. And most frequently it refers to this person. Sometimes the word is used just to describe the spirit of a person or a system. Something can be Antichrist. When Peter said, Jesus, you will never go to the cross, Jesus responded, get behind me, Satan. Because what he was saying was Antichrist. Okay, we have to understand that. Now, the word Antichrist does become very important because we use the word as the opposite of Jesus, right? We have the Christ and then we have the Antichrist. But that's only part of what would be the meaning of the word Antichrist. The other meaning, and this is an important part of understanding Antichrist, is not just the opposite, not just anti in that sense, but also that word anti can also mean this, another. Okay, so this person that will come on the scenes will present himself ultimately as another Christ. He's not out there saying like, Jesus is bad. That's not where he's going with this. It starts with, he's an alternative Messiah for people. He will present himself, and he will be presented as an alternative Messiah. But there are differences in chapter 13:1 from chapter 12:3 between the description of the devil and the Antichrist. The devil, the dragon, has 7 crowns, but the Antichrist has 10 crowns. Okay, the devil has 7 crowns and the Antichrist has 10 crowns. So why the difference? Well, that will be for the world to find out when that happens. It seems like when the devil is described as having 7 crowns, that's speaking of he represents the completion of evil. But when the Antichrist is wearing 10 crowns, it seems to be speaking of some type of government that will exist during that time. Of what that means exactly, we don't know. In Daniel chapter 7, if you want more reference information, read Daniel 7. I'm not going to read it today, but you can do that. But I'll read one little bit, Daniel 7:24. It says that the 10 horns are 10 kings. So some form of coalition of power will exist in the last days. Daniel has this really powerful vision, and Daniel 7 and Daniel 9 are extremely interesting chapters as it relates to the last days. And Daniel's alive during the Babylonian Empire, but he also lived into the second great world empire, which was the Medo-Persian Empire. After them, and by the way, it's just history, no test, don't worry about it. After them would come the Greeks, and then finally after them would come the Romans. And then many years later, the British Empire would rule for most of the world. Okay, but we have these 4 great empires, and Daniel, at the very beginning of the first great empire, Babylon, he has a vision of all of these empires. The Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans. And then in the middle of the Roman Empire, he has this vision of a recurring Roman Empire in the very last days. This is why when you hear people talk about the last days, if you hear Christians talk about the last days, oftentimes you'll hear them say, "Oh, the EU is the kingdom of the Antichrist," right? And when the EU was first starting, people got excited. Ooh, Christians got excited. Ooh, 5 nations joined together. When we get to 10, we out of here. Okay. And then they got to 7, and it was like, oh, baby, 3 more. 3 more, and the devil will appear, And then all of a sudden it went from like 7 to 14. And all the Christians were like, oh, shoot. Well, some of those are going to. And then now, and you know how many countries there are today in the EU? There's 27. Okay, so it ruined our great theology. Human history ruined a really good idea. So we don't know exactly what that looks like. Okay, it was foolish then, and it would be foolish today to try to say this is what it is. We simply know this: it will happen in some way, in some shape, and in some form. Is it the EU? Is it this? Is it that? Come on, I have no idea. It's fun to speculate, but speculation taken too far is a distraction from what really matters. You can spend so much time worrying about whether the EU is something and forget to share the love of Jesus with our neighbor. So if you really believe in a rapture of the church, you won't be a part of that whole thing. So what are you worried about? Let's focus. We need to keep focused on what matters. But something is going to happen. Now look at verse 2. The beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear. His mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. I've already mentioned it before, so I'll be quick on this one. And that is to say, when John writes the revelation of Jesus Christ, he was not doing it like a 21st century journalist who would say, when he says, and I saw this, it doesn't mean that he was like looking at a person who had this, like he looked like a lion, looked like a leopard, looked like a bear. It means this is the expression of this person's power was like that. The expression of this person's political power, world power, was quick as a leopard, powerful like a bear, and all consuming like a lion. So it's not meant to say to you and me, like there's not a person that's going to come on and kind of looks like a lion and we're like, wow, that might be the Antichrist. Don't do that. That's not what's happening here. It's meant to express a way of thinking, a mindset. By the way, if you go back, and you should, if you reference this to the book of Daniel, when he describes each of the world empires, he describes them as an animal. By the way, guess what animals he uses? The same animals. So John is not describing a person looking a certain way, but the quality of the kingdom in the last days will look like little bits of Babylon, little bits of Persia, little bits of Greece, and little bits of Rome. He's going to have all these little bits of, he's going to have learned from all of past and bring something together. This beast, this Antichrist, is expressing a system in the last days. It's not just describing a person. Okay, when you think, again, easy example, like when you think Hitler, you would think Nazism, but we never say Nazism, do we? It's Hitler, right? A person representing a system. In the last days, a person representing a system. We know, though, that the beast and the Antichrist, there's Christians that say the beast or the Antichrist is not an actual person. It's just going to be the world government. But the Bible is pretty clear. It definitely and most certainly is a person. Look at this, verse 3. I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. Again, if you want absolute specificity, there will be books and YouTube videos that will tell you, this is exactly what this means. Problem is we're not exactly sure what this means. What it seems to mean, however, is that this person is going to be mortally wounded and revived. Some believe that means he will die, listen, he is the other Christ, right? So some kind of a death and resurrection, totally possible. And you're like, wait, that's not possible. In the last days, things that are not possible today are possible. Things happen in ways that we can't imagine. And you want to know why? Because in the last days, God lets things happen that would otherwise not be possible. So it's possible that this beast, the Antichrist, this world leader, is wounded mortally to death and then it rises from the dead. Or is severely wounded and then recovers miraculously. Either way, whatever happens will be so fantastic that when the false prophet comes, he's going to cause everybody to worship this person. This person becomes worshipable. I don't think that's a word. Teachers can correct later. This person becomes worshipable because of this act that happens. In fact, we know it is directly connected to this specific act. This rising makes the world say, oh man, this person is worthy of worship, which is crazy. It's crazy because today, thank you. See, somebody gets this. You have to understand, like today, when you think of it, like here you are, you're trying to share Christ, you're trying to talk to people, and what is the world's kind of, at least the Western world? It's really only the Western world. The Western world's reaction is like, we don't want God. We think religion, it's kind of the Marxist view that religion is the opiate of the masses. Religion is ruining people. It's not helping people, right? If we could get rid of religion, we would clear up so much. We would clear up so many problems. Things would be so much better if we didn't have religion. And it's wild to think that in the last days, there's a resurgence of a willingness to worship. And so I want to draw your attention to something. When we talk about worship, you and I think of a specific thing, right? We sing songs, we worship God, we go to prayer meetings, we take time in our week to come together and to worship. Now, you remember back in the first century, and we see this in the book of Acts, but church history really talks about this. The Roman emperor set himself up as a god, right? Caesar. And the Senate declared this person a god, right? And that everyone had to worship Caesar. But what did worship mean? I think we need to understand this, because you think, how is the whole world going to go from hating the idea of religion and God to all of a sudden, worshiping? It's because you're thinking of worship the way you and I worship. And you're forgetting that's not what it looked like in the old days, and it's not what it'll look like in the future. In the old days, what that meant was that everybody had to say Caesar is Lord. You just said Caesar is Lord. And nobody cared. If you had no religion, and they're like, hey, your taxes are cheaper if you say Caesar is Lord. Cool, Caesar is Lord. That's it? Yeah, you're good. You just worshiped Caesar. And all the people are like, I didn't worship nobody. I was just said, you offered me a good deal. That's what we're talking about. Now, the Christians would come and they'd say, oh, I can't say that. I don't believe that. Now, we're a little bit pragmatic in 2024. We were like, bro, just say it and don't mean it. And they would have said back then, well, that's lying. And we'd say, yeah, it's small. But they held their conviction, and most of them were killed for it. Said, I don't believe that Caesar is Lord. This is the one thing that I can do to say, I'm different. I'm going to live my life. I'm going to be married. I'm going to have kids. I'm going to live in society like everybody else. But I have to have something that says I'm different, and this is going to be what it is. I'm going to put my 2 feet down and say, I will not say Caesar is Lord, because he is not. There is one Lord, one God, right? But for everybody else, so the Christians were like, oh, we can't worship Caesar. And everybody else is like, we're not worshiping Caesar. We're just saying Caesar is Lord. And the Christians are like, that's worship. And the world is like, no, it's not. That's what we're talking about in the last days. Don't think of the whole world going, oh, praise the Antichrist. That's not going to happen. The world is far too independent-minded for that. But it's pragmatic decision to say, I'm going to follow this person because it'll be good for me. If you really want to know who God is in the last days for the world, it's self. I'm going to do what's good for me. I'm going to do what's good for me. Now, does that ring a bell with the world we live in today? Now it makes a little bit more sense. And there will come a person who will say, worship yourself by honoring me. I'm going to give you what you want. And of course, the world will follow. Verse 4, they worship the dragon who gave authority to the beast. They worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? In verses 12 and 14, we're going to see that worship of the beast is directly connected to this mortal injury that he had. So what that means exactly, unclear. Verse 5, he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months, 3.5 years. The beast is given power to speak for 3.5 years. The whole system's power comes in the first part of what we call the tribulation. The whole system falls apart in the last 3.5 years. The whole thing falls apart. This is like a massive buildup of religion and politics, and then it just goes boom to the ground. It's like this massive buildup. The rocket is going in, and before it clears gravity, it'll just come pounding down to the earth in absolute ruin, as a reminder for all of human history that when you try to take power for yourself, you can't hold it, you can't sustain it. You'll lose it all. When you try to take for yourself, even if he gains the whole world but loses his soul, right? That's what the Bible says. And so the first part of the beginning of it all, though, is like peace, love, and kumbaya. They're re-singing Michael Jackson's "We Are the World." Everybody's happy. There's harmony. Everybody's in good spirits, right? There's this, there's things happening that are just beautiful and powerful, and everybody's impressed. He was given a mouth to speak great things. We require leaders these days, both political and religious, to be. It didn't used to be this way, but today, starting in like the 50s or so, we require both religious leaders and political leaders to be good communicators. I know it sounds crazy, but before that, they weren't. They weren't even required to be. These dudes didn't even go out and speak. The people would just go tell everybody, you should vote for this guy, and they would win. They never went out and talked to anybody. One of the most famous sermons of all time, Jonathan Edwards, he preached a message. The title is not really expressive of the message itself, but the title was Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. That doesn't sound like the message you'd want to go to. It's a little angry. But anyways, there was a lot more to the message. And when Jonathan Edwards preached that message, people that were there, Jonathan Edwards had his message written out, and people came into the sanctuary, and he just read his sermon like this. And the beast is given power to speak for 3.5. And he just did that. And it says that while he was just speaking slowly and quietly, reading, didn't look up, didn't communicate, didn't talk to people. He's just reading his sermon. And it says that people began to just weep and cry and say, God help me, you know. So next week I'm going to start doing that. I'm just going to stare down and I expect revival, okay? So you understand that we have a different way of communicating today, don't we? Things are a little bit different. And in the last days, that will certainly be true. Verse 6, he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. Isn't that an interesting phrase? Because we've read this, we've been using this phrase, tribe, tongue, and nation, as a positive every time. Right? The culmination of the work of God in the world will be that in heaven, Revelation 7, verse 9, there will be people praising him from every tribe, tongue, nation, and language. And we're like, yeah, God, it is literally why, it's the theme of our Imago Dei event. Like we're going to celebrate that every tribe, every tongue, every nation, every language, every people group. Isn't that beautiful? And then we read this in Revelation 13, and it tells us very clearly that in the last days, the Antichrist will have power over every tribe, tongue, people, and nation. He will have power. And notice, not only power, but it says in verse 7, he was given power to make war and to overcome them. This is going to be really important for what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes, so I need you to put on your thinking caps for this one a little bit. The Antichrist focuses, first of all, his attention against God. He starts his focus against God, right? Against God, to blaspheme his name, against his tabernacle, which always is a reminder to us that at some point in the last days, there's another, the Old Testament used the word tabernacle, so John is using an Old Testament phrase for them. But in the New Testament, we call it the temple. Okay, it was two different buildings, but same concept, same purpose. So obviously there's another temple. We talked about that other weeks. And if everything I'm saying to you, you guys are like, oh man, this is so ridiculous, it's so fantastical, who knows if that's ever going to happen? I agree with you. It's just that once I accept that God is real, I'm good with everything else that he says. That's where it comes down to. Like, hey, I told you this on Wednesday night. If you accept in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, the rest of the Bible is easy. If you can believe that, God made everything. Once you accept that, all the rest of it is so easy. Oh, how could Jesus be resurrected? Dude, he made everything. He can do whatever he wants. I had somebody call in on a radio show this week, and they're like, could God speak to me audibly? They were like, whoa. And I said to the guy, I was like, well, does God speak to your heart? If he can speak to your heart, why can't he speak to your ears? How much harder is that for God? It's no different for him to speak to your heart as it is to speak to your ears. We have this idea that like, oh, these things are so outlandish and it could never happen. What's really outlandish is that God created the whole world. Once you accept that, the rest of this becomes a lot easier. So, do I believe in the very last days there's going to be another temple again? Sure. Do I know how that'll ever happen? Not a clue. But then notice, he turns his attention towards God's people. He tried to attack the Jews, but it says that he began now to make war with the saints. And here's the interesting one. You ready? He was granted power to overcome them. That does not sit well with our theology, does it? This one is problematic. It's problematic for us for so many reasons. I think the main reason that this thing is problematic is because we've believed and we've been taught that we have power over the devil and that devil doesn't have power over us. Okay, so we're reminded that this is a very unique and an interesting time in human history. I will go out on a limb and once again say, I believe, though I will not be dogmatic, but I believe that the rapture of the church has already happened. I believe that the sudden and dramatic removal of so many people is the reason that the Antichrist turns his anger and angst towards those believers that are still on the planet. You know, when so many people would be gone, that would create a massive, The world has never seen such chaos as will be caused by that event. I believe it will be. I will not be dogmatic about that. But the devil is given power, and he gives that power to the Antichrist to overcome the saints. And I'd like to point out, as I mentioned, this message is antithetical to all of Christianity. We have entire biblical positions that express a view that in the last days, Christians will miss suffering and pain that the rest of the world endures. I mean, you guys, we've created theology that always benefits us. We should wonder if that's true then. When it always benefits you, you got to wonder, is it true? We live in arguably one of the easiest times in human history to be a Christian. And ain't our fault, it's our mom's fault, honestly. Let's get real. We were born at this time, right? This is just when we live. But we live in one of the arguably the easiest times. I know we can all talk about how things are going to hell in a handbasket or whatever. But the truth is we're in a public school freely to be here. We have you don't like the way things are, you could even write it up online and ain't nobody going to come knocking on your door. And you say, yet, exactly. Yet. One day that will happen, I agree. But when we've created an entire theological position that not only do we live a really good life and we live at a really good time, and we're going to heaven, and wait, one more thing, and you'll never suffer. Ooh! Isn't that crazy? We've created an entire biblical view that says, you're going to live a good life now, love God, trust God, He's going to do good things for you. And then one day you're going to die, hopefully a really easy, simple, painless death. Fall asleep and not wake up. God bless you. I said it in Hungarian. Sorry. Okay. And then you're going to go to heaven. And if you don't die sleepless, in your sleep, and you live up until the very last days, don't worry about it because you'll be raptured and nothing bad will ever happen to you. Who doesn't like that theology? Holy cow. I love that one. If there was a vote, that one wins. The problem. And I know so many, apologists, theologians, really smart people who said that reason alone is why I don't believe that the rapture will happen before the tribulation. When Christians close off a part of their brain that says, I might go through difficulties. I mean, arguably, the Western world, and that includes a big chunk of the globe, we live a different life than people in the Eastern world. We live a totally different life. It's not our fault. We shouldn't feel bad about that. It's the one we have. But there's very few people on the planet, like statistically, if you just look at numbers, global numbers, there's not a lot of people that wake up in the morning and say, my life is probably going to go very well today. And if it doesn't, I'm going to be really upset and frustrated, and I'm going to even question God. Most people wake up and are like, it's not going to be a great day. Life's going to be hard. I'm on my third job that I work 7 days a week to try to put food in my kids' mouths. I live in a hut and a dirt floor. And I love God. But I'm not assuming that my love for God is going to change the dirt floor. Do you see what I'm getting at? Again, I'm not saying this to try to make you feel bad. You shouldn't feel bad. This is the life that we have. The goal isn't like you should all feel bad. What good is that going to do? But we have to see, we've created entire teachings around the idea that we have wood floors and we have a decent life. And if we carry that all the way, it's going to go all the way into the really good things where we won't even suffer. And so when we teach that, what happens is somebody has a bad day, and who's the first person they challenge? God. I thought everything was going to be good. By the way, when I gave my life to Christ, maybe this is your story too, I do feel like things got worse. Life got a little harder. I forgot that there's an actual devil who hates me and hates God. See? The kid was like, hey, yeah. We're one of the very few cultures, and again, don't hear me say this as if we're a problem. It's not like that. But you have to understand, we've created entire biblical positions around the idea that we will never suffer. And guess what happens to so many Christians when they do go through I got a flat tire, where's God? This teaching has a name And none of us would say that we were really like, oh no, I don't believe in that teaching. But it has a name, and it was more popular back in like the 90s. It was called the health and wealth doctrine. Okay. And it was the idea that if you're a Christian and you're really faithful to God, you'll always be healthy and you'll probably have a little cash. But if you have a little cash, you should give it to the church. It was the message. So it was kind of interesting how that worked, you know. But who doesn't want to believe that? That if I follow God, I'm going to be better off than if I didn't in a physical, temporal way. Health and wealth. And I'm going to suggest something to you, that there is a resurgence of this thinking, but it has reared itself in a different direction than any of us assumed would happen. Okay? I'm going to suggest to you that this health and wealth mindset, not the actual doctrine that I'm going to be healthy and I'm going to be wealthy, but the idea, this same principle of health and wealth, which said, if you give your life to God, then things should go better for you. I would suggest to you that this health and wealth principle has become no longer individualistic, but we've created it as a collective society. It's called, you ready? You're not going to like this, nationalism. Specifically Christian. Not patriotism. Don't ever be confused. My girl's off to serve our country. Many of you have done the same thing. We're patriots. But it's expressed itself in this, we're better, I'm better, how dare you try to take what's mine? It's health and wealth for the 21st century. And it's perverted the gospel. It's an absolute perversion. And today, we're plagued with this concept that, if you just are a Christian, you got to fight for yours. If you believe the Bible, Jesus already fought for you and won it all. This world, dude, if America's heaven, we lost. I love this country, but my home is in heaven. And we get to just help grab people out from hell for the rest of our lives. And then one day we die and we get to go to be with Jesus. I just think of my friend Haley, that had Jesus come back a year ago, maybe that's your story, had Jesus come back a year ago, where would you be? Aren't you glad that he's waited? I'm glad he's patient. I'm in, so I'd like him to speed it up. Let's be honest. We're like, once you're in the group, you're like, all right, Lord, let's go. But he's like, dude, relax, there's other people. No, Lord, nobody matters like me. Wait, did I say that out loud? You know, so this individual mindset of health and wealth has now become a collective mindset of I am deserved something that's been taken from me, and I got to fight for that thing. Friends, it's not biblical. We have to fight for what is biblical. We have to fight for what is biblical. And what is biblical is that we've been saved in time and space, in our place in this world. God brought us to this place. It is so cool. What a privilege we have. When every bit of your expression of where you live is a negative, well, this is gone and this is gone. Dude, we get to live in America. It's pretty awesome. But it is expressing itself in this ugly form that has taken on some Christian idea. It's not Christian at all. It's just cool. We get to be where we are. But it's for privilege and opportunity, not to be squandered by defending, I got to keep what is mine. What makes Christianity so different is that we don't believe we have to win at all costs. It's okay if I lose because God will be glorified in all things. That's always been the message, and it should be all the way to the very end. Verse 8, all who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life, of the Lamb slain before the foundation of the world. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. Verse 10, he who leads into captivity will go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. I'm going to just talk about these verses, and I'm going to next week talk about the false prophet. This comboed, 1-2 punch of political leader, religious leader. This week I get to pick on the political leader. Next week I'll pick on the religious leader. So I'm good at picking on religious leaders. I'm a religious person, so I can do it. Okay. Verse 8, all who dwell on the earth will worship him. Again, I remind you, that's not like bow down, oh my gosh, he's the green. No, it just means there's obedience, there's They're obliging this person. And they're like, hey, this person is powerful. This person is great. This person is amazing. But it won't look like what we're used to. Now, it's an interesting phrase there at the end of that verse 8, like, all will worship him whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb that was slain before the foundation of the world. A couple things I want to mention, and this is kind of like, yeah, it's kind of important. And the first one is this, like, let's be very clear. When it says that Jesus was slain before the foundation of the world, we also need to really, this is important to say, he was actually killed in time and space. He was not killed before the foundation of the world. When it says that he was slain before the foundation of the world, in fact, later in Revelation 17, the same wording is used, but it takes out that part of it. So we know that it's not that it's a misstatement, but it's important to understand this. Like, Jesus died in time, in space, during the Roman Empire, in Jerusalem, at a particular time and in a particular day. He died. But the concept of salvation through his sacrifice on the cross happened before the foundation of the world. Do you see how those two things happen together? Sometimes I think we read the Gospels, and I want to challenge you to not do this next time you read a Gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Sometimes we read it like it's a script already written. Like Jesus already knows what's going to happen. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Jesus knew he was going to sweat blood. He knew that. Oh, he knew this was going to happen. And we kind of already presume into the whole thing, like we almost remove the emotion of the gospel account of the death of Jesus because it was like, well, he had already done all those things. Before the foundation of the world, he did it. Don't do that. His mind and will and soul were determined from all of eternity to bring salvation to you and me. God willed his sacrifice for all of eternity, for all of us. That's why the Bible says in Ephesians 1 that he chose you before the foundation of the world. Because he had already made a way of salvation. But when we get to the actual time and space of the gospel account of Jesus' life, don't even for a second think like Jesus was like, oh wait, hold on, let me look at the script. What am I supposed to say now? What do I do now? Oh, now turn over table. Turn over table. It's not like that. He lived, breathed, spoke, ministered. He suffered. He died, and he was buried. And he rose again in time and space for you and for me, in our world. Not some ethereal, eternal state, but right here in our world. Jesus came, became one of us, and offered his life. And those who believe have their names written in the Lamb's book of life. That's the statement here. If you believe, then your name has been written in the Lamb's book of life. This is not Santa Claus's good list. I think the concept makes us realize that there are those who have been born again and those who have not been born again. I'll invite the worship team to come up and close this off while I finish a few more thoughts here. Jesus lived in time and space and offered his life. And if you have put your faith in him, to put your faith in him means you've repented of your sins and you've invited him to come into your life, to be Savior. When we do that, our names are written in the Lamb's book of life. This is the best part. Are you ready? If you've put your faith in Jesus, you have been sealed by God forever. I believe that. Now somebody's going to come and say, and I respect this, but what if I walk away from God? What if I walk away from God? Well, I believe if you've put your faith in Jesus, you won't get very far. You can walk away from God. One of my favorite, Charles Spurgeon, he used to say, all of Paul's letters started with grace and peace. He would say grace and peace. Grace and peace, grace and peace, grace and peace, right? And Charles Spurgeon said, those are the two Dobermans that God sends after all people to hunt you down. Grace and peace. By the way, he made the joke, he said, but you should know that in the pastoral letters, the ones he wrote to Timothy and Titus, it says grace, mercy, and peace. He's like, pastors need 3 dogs after them, okay? But thank you, Cassandra. Yes. My people are on cue today. The rest of you have failed at that moment, okay? But I need you to know this, because some of you are gonna you're like, I haven't been doing so great with God. People. They're 49er fans too, just so you know. I need you to know something. Regardless of where you're at right now, if you've put your faith in Jesus, I believe he's going to keep coming after you. I know some of us don't want others in the room. I don't want them to hear that because I'm just going to go do whatever they want. No. I believe so powerfully in the grace of God that he won't let me continue in the wrong direction. Now, I'll just say this as a warning. If you feel like you've just been able to skate by and get away and go on in your life, then I want you to ask yourself this question. Have I ever been born again? That's what it really comes down to. If you've been born again, I want to encourage you with this hope. If you're not doing as good today as maybe you should be doing, acknowledge it, repent of it, and come back to the Lord. And you're his. You belong to him. Your name has been written in the Lamb's Book of Life. But if you're like, dude, I'm crushing this whole thing. I don't even feel bad. I'm living however I want, and I'm getting away with whatever I want. Then you, friend, have not been born again. I don't create the standard, but I do have the privilege to tell you, be born again. That's what the Bible tells us. And Jesus even backs it up, and he writes it through John. If you have an ear, and it doesn't mean a physical ear, doesn't mean physical hearing, it means if you can receive from God, then listen to what God is saying here. Verse 10, whoever leads into captivity will go into captivity. He who kills with the sword will be killed by the sword. This is the patience and faith of the saints. Friends, in the last days, the Antichrist is given some kind of power to overcome saints. You have a great privilege right now. I will not tell you that life will always be dandy. It won't. But those days will literally be hell on earth that you were never meant for. You were made for the presence of God, for beauty, for glory, for life, for light. All people were. We've been lied to. And this person will come who just wants to feed our own sense of self-value, self-centeredness. And I say to you and me today, fight the urge to center yourself in yourself. Fight the urge. Push against it and instead say, Lord, I want you to be the Lord of my life. That's today's message. Like, I don't know who the Antichrist is. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's happening in the EU. I don't know what's happening now. I have no idea. But here's what I do know. I am pressed with an opportunity today to fight against self-centeredness, egotistical self-worship that makes me the center. And I'm going to center myself on the Lord Jesus Christ.
Thank you so much for joining us, whether online or in person. We pray that the ministry of Calvary San Diego is encouraging you in your faith. If you would like to follow along with what we are doing or hear more teachings, you can do so by downloading the Calvary SD mobile or TV app. Also, if you would like to partner with us and worship through giving, you can do so at calvarysd.com/give. Thanks for tuning in.